3 days after giving birth, I could barely stand without feeling pain when my own mother looked me directly in the eyes and said, "Pack your things. You and the baby need to leave. This house belongs to this family, not you." I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I simply picked up my newborn, carried her upstairs, made one phone call, and waited. 24 hours later, the same people who had laughed while forcing me out were standing in my living room completely speechless. They had just discovered a single document that changed everything they thought they owned. They believed I was helpless. What they didn't know was that I had been preparing for a moment like this for years. And before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. I'm also curious, where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? Let me know in the comments below. Now, let's get back to the story. The day I carried my newborn through the front door of what I considered my dream home, I truly believed I was entering the happiest chapter of my life. Every wall, every window, and every room represented years of overtime, careful saving, and sacrifices that most people had never seen. I hadn't inherited that house. Nobody had simply given it to me. I had worked for every part of it. My husband, Daniel, had left 2 days earlier for a 3-week overseas business project that he couldn't postpone. Neither of us liked the timing, but life rarely waits for everything to be perfect. Before leaving, he kissed our baby, held me close, and whispered, "Take care of our little family. I'll be home before you know it." I believed I could handle everything on my own. At least, I thought I could. The first surprise came that evening when my mother pulled into the driveway without calling first. "I knew you'd need some help," she announced as she carried 2 large suitcases through the front door before I even had a chance to respond. I forced a polite smile. Recovering from childbirth while caring for a newborn was exhausting, and maybe having my mother around for a few days really would make things easier. Instead, by the following afternoon, my older sister Emily arrived with her husband and their 2 energetic children. "They'll only stay for dinner," Mom assured me. Dinner turned into breakfast. Breakfast turned into another night. Within 48 hours, my quiet home no longer felt like my home at all. The baby's feeding schedule was constantly disrupted by loud conversations. Toys were scattered across my living room. My carefully organized kitchen was being rearranged without anyone bothering to ask. Every time I tried to settle my daughter quietly for a nap, someone would open the nursery door because they wanted just one more cuddle. Whenever I gently asked everyone to keep the noise down, my mother would laugh. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, "families don't need permission." Then, on the 3rd evening, while everyone sat comfortably around my dining table, Mom looked directly at me and smiled. "I've made a decision," she announced. "We're all moving in tomorrow." I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh and admit she was joking. She didn't. Instead, my sister smiled as if this had already been discussed between them. "Honestly," Emily said, "it just makes sense. The kids love it here. Mom can help with the baby. And this house is much bigger than ours." I looked from one face to another, desperately hoping someone would recognize how unreasonable this sounded. No one did. The next morning, I woke to the unmistakable sound of furniture scraping across the hardwood. My body was still aching from childbirth, but I forced myself downstairs anyway. When I reached the living room, I found my mother directing my brother-in-law as he carried my favorite reading chair toward the garage. "It takes up too much space," my mother said casually. "We need room for everyone." "Much space," she explained casually. "The living room looks better this way." I blinked at her, barely able to believe what I was hearing. "You moved my furniture?" I asked. She simply waved her hand as though the matter wasn't important. "Don't be so dramatic." That quickly became her favorite sentence. When I asked why my baby's nursery had been rearranged, she called me dramatic. When Emily filled my pantry with groceries I had never purchased and threw away food I had carefully prepared, I was being dramatic. When my niece and nephew ran into the nursery during nap time and woke my daughter crying, I was dramatic again. Every boundary I tried to establish became another joke to them. The guest bedroom gradually filled with Emily's clothes. My brother-in-law started parking his SUV inside my garage because, according to him, it was more convenient. Family photographs I had personally chosen were taken down from the walls and replaced with pictures that somehow included everyone except me. Even the kitchen no longer looked familiar. My coffee mugs were moved into different cabinets. My baby's bottles were stored in places I couldn't find. It felt like someone was slowly erasing my life while I was too exhausted to stop them. That evening, after spending nearly an hour rocking my exhausted daughter until she finally fell asleep, I walked into the living room. I took a breath and spoke as calmly as I could. "I appreciate that everyone wants to help," I said, but it's time for all of you to go home." The room immediately went silent. My mother leaned back in the same chair she had moved without asking and folded her arms. "If you don't like the way this family lives," she said coldly, "then you leave." No one challenged her. No one defended me. I looked down at my sleeping baby in my arms. Without saying another word, I turned around, walked upstairs, and quietly locked the bedroom door behind us. The moment the lock clicked, the sounds from downstairs became nothing more than a distant murmur. For the first time in several days, it was just me and my daughter. She had finally fallen asleep against my shoulder. Her tiny fingers were wrapped around mine, almost as if she were reminding me that she depended on me to keep her safe. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "I promise, no one is taking our home away from us." Instead of crying, I carried her to the bassinet beside my bed and opened the small fireproof lockbox inside my closet. Most people kept jewelry or important valuables inside one. I kept something far more important. Inside were every document connected to the house: the warranty papers, purchase agreement, mortgage records, insurance policy, utility accounts, security system registration, and most importantly, the property deed. I spread the papers across the bed and checked them carefully. Every single document listed exactly one owner, my name. Then an old memory suddenly came back to me. On the day I signed the closing papers, my attorney had smiled as he handed me the final folder. "People change," he had told me. "Even family. Keep every document together, and never let guilt convince you to give up something you worked hard to earn." At the time, I had laughed and thanked him. Now, those words didn't sound like ordinary legal advice anymore. They sounded almost like preparation for exactly what was happening. I picked up my phone. The first call lasted less than 3 minutes. The second was even shorter. The third ended with someone calmly saying, "We'll take care of everything tomorrow morning." That was all I needed to hear. Downstairs, I could hear laughter echoing through the house. Cabinet doors opened and closed repeatedly. Someone was measuring the dining room with a tape measure. Emily was excitedly talking about turning my home office into a playroom for her children. My mother was already discussing where she wanted her new reclining chair placed. They weren't treating the house like a place they were temporarily staying anymore. In their minds, they had already claimed it. Not one of them seemed to understand that every decision they were making depended on permission they had never received. I quietly placed all the documents back inside the lockbox and slipped it into my overnight bag beside a folder containing certified copies. There was no panic, no anger, no shouting, just preparation. Before turning off the bedroom light, I looked around the room that had become my daughter's first home. For the first time since my family had arrived, I smiled. They believed tomorrow would be the day they finished taking everything away from me. They had no idea tomorrow would be the day I quietly reclaimed everything that had belonged to me all along. At exactly 9 o'clock the next morning, the doorbell rang. My mother glanced toward the entryway without even looking up from her coffee. "Emily," she called, "go see who that is." Emily walked to the front door with the confidence of someone welcoming visitors into her own house. But the moment she opened it, her smile disappeared. Standing on the porch were my property attorney, a locksmith, 2 representatives from the home security company, and a supervisor from a moving service, holding a clipboard. "Good morning," my attorney said politely. "We're here to meet with the homeowner." Before anyone could answer, I walked downstairs with my daughter resting safely in one arm and a folder in the other. "I'm the homeowner," I said. The entire room went silent. My mother stood, so quickly that her coffee spilled across the table. "What is all this?" she demanded. My attorney calmly opened the folder and placed several certified documents on the dining table. "These records confirm that the property is solely owned by Ms. Harper," he explained. "No other person has ownership or residency rights unless she specifically grants them." Emily stared at the papers, then shook her head. "That can't be right." "It is," my attorney replied calmly. "Every relevant legal document has been reviewed and verified." My brother-in-law folded his arms across his chest. "We've been staying here with her permission." My attorney gave him a polite nod. That may have been true previously. However, the homeowner has now withdrawn that permission. No one answered. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument they could have started. Outside, the locksmith began replacing every exterior lock on the property. Inside, the security representative started updating the alarm system, access code, and digital entry settings. The security representatives continued updating the access codes and settings while explaining each change to me. The moving supervisor approached me and asked calmly, "Would you like us to start packing the personal belongings that belong to your family?" I looked around the room. There was no shouting and no name-calling, just facts and decisions that should have been made days earlier. Yes, I answered quietly. My mother watched in disbelief as the workers carefully packed the suitcases, children's toys, clothing, and boxes that had appeared inside my home over the previous few days. Nobody argued with the workers. They simply gathered their belongings and carried them toward the front door. When the final box was taken outside, my mother finally turned toward me. "You planned all of this," she whispered. I gently adjusted my daughter against my shoulder and looked directly at her. "No," I said calmly. "I simply protected what I worked so hard to build and what truly belongs to my little family." After everyone left, the house felt strangely quiet. For the first time since bringing my daughter home from the hospital, I could hear her soft breathing without having to compete with loud conversations, doors being slammed, or constant interruptions. I slowly walked through every room. The furniture was back where it belonged. The nursery was quiet. The kitchen was organized again. Nothing about the house itself had changed, but the feeling inside it had completely changed. That afternoon, I updated every security code, collected the spare keys, and placed the certified property documents safely back inside the lockbox where they belong. A week later, Daniel finally came home. I sat down with him and told him everything that had happened while he was away. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he pulled me and our daughter into his arms. "You didn't break this family," he said softly. "You protected the family we created." His words stayed with me. Over the following months, my mother reached out several times. I wasn't cruel toward her, and I wasn't holding on to anger. But for the first time, I was completely honest. I explained that our relationship could continue only if she respected my boundaries and understood that my home was not hers to claim. Things didn't suddenly become perfect. Trust wasn't rebuilt in a few conversations. But slowly, things became calmer. I learned that respect could only begin once entitlement ended. One evening, I stood quietly inside my daughter's nursery and watched her sleep beneath the soft glow of her night. As I looked at her peaceful little face, I realized something important. Protecting my home had never really been about walls, furniture, or legal documents. It had been about protecting the safe and loving environment my daughter deserved from the very beginning. And that was something I would never apologize for. Sometimes, protecting your peace means standing firm, even when the people crossing your boundaries are your own family. Loving someone does not mean surrendering your dignity, ignoring your boundaries, or allowing your child's sense of safety to be compromised. If this story meant something to you, share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more powerful family stories with unforgettable endings.